As for the England World Cup squad, I do just want to react to that very, very quickly. We've seen that squad come out. So Henderson, Pickford, Trafford as the goalkeepers. Dan Burn, Gahey, Reece-James, Konza, Livramento, O'Reilly, Kwanzaa, Spence and Stones as the defenders. Elliot Anderson, Jude Bellingham, Eze, Henderson, Mainu, Declan Rice and Rodgers as the midfielders. And then Gordon, Kane, Madueke, Rashford, Saka, Toney and Watkins as the attackers. You know what? I think there's been a lot of conversation about who's been left out. But I look at that squad. You were always going to leave people out. There was always going to be controversies. I quite like that squad. We are going to a tournament where you're going to have to play every 3 or 4 days in a hot climate and do a lot of travelling. And there's a lot of players there who are going to be capable of dealing with that, in the sense that not just age, but also flexibility. You know, Dan Burn can play centre-back and left-back. Jed Spence can play right-back and left-back. Elliot Anderson, Jude Bellingham, Declan Rice, Mainu, Morgan Rodgers. They can play multiple midfield positions. I mean, look, Jordan Henderson for me is a waste of time, but obviously it's an experience thing. I would have took Scott or Garner or Wharton. I would have took Lewis Hall over Jed Spence, but Jed Spence can play left back and right back. Ivan Toney going is interesting, but I wouldn't have took Calvert-Lewin or Solanke anyway, and Watkins is already going. And, you know, I think the biggest two for me are Foden and Palmer. You know, the quality of Phil Foden and Cole Palmer is like very, very high. You know, people moaning about the Maguires and the Whartons and the Lewis Halls. You know, we're talking about Phil Foden and Cole Palmer here. They are like superstar players. No one's really talking about it because they're not going because they've not played well. So I think Thomas Tuchel has had quite a, you know, big backlash over the last 24 hours. But having slept on it and looked at the squad, you're never going to make everybody happy anyway. From a squad perspective, we know our best 11 is Kane and Saka and Gordon or Rashford and Bellingham and Rodgers and Rice and Anderson and Konza and Gahey and O'Reilly and Reece-James and Pickford. You know, the problems only come if we lose players through injury. And then you're moving into the controversial squad picks. These are squad players people are moaning about. Like, our best 11 is our best 11. So, look, of course, maybe you wanted to take Harry Maguire. Maybe you wanted to take Lewis Hall. Maybe you wanted to take Adam Wharton. And that doesn't change. But I think some of the reaction and backlash to Thomas Tuchel is a little bit over the top. He's absolutely right to pick the team that he wants to pick. And he's certainly done that. And look, he said, look, about the Harry Maguire statement, he says, I'm a bit surprised. We had a private conversation and he had the chance to express his feelings. And I can see the reasons he could be in the squad. The decision is we stuck with the central defenders who carried us through the autumn. Harry Maguire's last competitive game for England was 2024. It's 2026. It's the summer of 2026. So, look, I was disappointed from Maguire on a Man United perspective, but, you know, that's for him to be disappointed. The national outcry, he hasn't played a competitive game for England for nearly 2 years. He's 33. We're going to play in a hot climate and we want to play a high line. There are reasons why you might actually go for other people. So I think it's a little bit of over the top. You know what? The biggest thing for me is that it's the first England World Cup squad since 1986, which is 40 years ago, that there's no Liverpool player there. And, you know, Liverpool obviously have their own issues around Arne Slot and whether they're going to keep him. And we're hearing that they are going to keep him. But that's embarrassing. I'd say it the same about Man United. To not have a Liverpool player in an England squad is embarrassing. And Liverpool, look, the funny thing is, Liverpool, it's Liverpool, not England. But you know what? And I don't think Liverpool fans will be that bothered. But I'd be bothered if I was a Liverpool fan, more from the perspective of you haven't got an English player good enough to get in an England squad. So I think that's quite big as well. He also spoke about Foden and Gibbs White and Palmer. He said, look, difficult phone calls. It's just a positional thing to have a balanced squad so we don't bring 5 number 10s. Even if it was painful, I think it was the right call for England. I like this. I think when you have a manager or a leader that makes difficult decisions, you don't have to agree with them, but you can respect the fact that they make difficult decisions. One of my biggest issues with Michael Carrick was his nepotism and favouritism. If not Michael Carrick. Sorry, Michael. Gareth Southgate. If this was Gareth Southgate's squad, Cole Palmer and Phil Foden would both be going. Harry Maguire would be going. Luke Shaw would be going. You know, we'd probably be taking Calvert-Lewin. Gareth Southgate squad would have been full of favourites. Tuchel's moved away from that. England haven't won a major trophy since 1966.